everybody, good evening. I'm here in West-Berkshire in England, visiting old friends, homeschool colleagues as well. And I'm here with Heidi Botha, the mother of Ilene Botha, and they used to be my friends and partners in crime in the Reading homeschool group, or the Berkshire homeschool group. So we're here, and Heidi and Ilene are just going to give a brief introduction, and then we're going to talk about how we did homeschooling and what was important to us and what we learned from it and what we would do differently maybe, and maybe the materials we use. So Heidi, if I can ask you first to briefly say something about yourself.
Hi, well, yes, so I'm originally from South Africa. We moved here in 1999, the end of 99, and we've been living here in England and
Did you already have
settled
children?
down. Yes, so both my children, I've got two children, Ilene and an older brother, Rowan, and they were both born in South Africa, and yes. So I started my homeschooling journey here in England.
Yeah. Okay. And did you work previously as something?
A very long time ago, before I had children, I worked as in the secretarial realm, but since having children, I've been very lucky to be able to be at home and work in the home. Yeah.
And you yourself went through state education, I presume?
Yes.
Okay. Yeah. Ilene, do you want to say something about yourself?
Yeah, so my name's Ilene and I'm the daughter of Heidi. I was home educated throughout all my education right up until I went to college at the age of 16. And then after that I've been working, and I suppose we'll get into that later on. But yeah.
Yeah, and both you and Rowan were homeschooled, right?
Yes.
Yeah,
that's correct.
Yeah, and we talked a little bit before, because when you go on homeschooling your children and meeting up like we did and going for walks and all these sports events and stuff, we never really talked about the backgrounds of our philosophies that much, or not how we came to it.
Yeah.
So what made you decide to homeschool?
Well, I suppose it was in South Africa. I already was thinking of, homeschooling, but then we moved to England, and just arriving in a different country. You don't know anybody. Everything's a bit different, and so then I decided to put my son into school. And so he did the kind of last few months of reception and the first few months of year one, and then I took him out. Mm-hmm. I just found in those kind of few months that he was in school, that his personality was changing. To something I didn't, really like. He seemed to be quite frustrated when he came home. Not really able to, express what he was feeling. Not really interested in the homework that he brought home to do. So. Yes, after much deliberation, we decided we would take him out and then home educate him.
Yeah. So at that time when he was in school, did he go for the whole day, or were there half days, or how?
No. So when he went, it was full days.
Yeah.
Yes.
Because I think it's maybe important to explain to Dutch viewers that they go to reception at 3 or 4.
I think it's meant to be in the year they turn 5. I think
at that time. Okay.
Yeah, in England, yes. and yeah, so Rowan had just turned 5 the December, because now he missed the first few months of reception because we had just arrived in the country, etc. And so he had just turned 5.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. And then when you took him out, he was 7.
It was just before he turned 6.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. And then what? I mean, you've taken your son out, and then what did you do? Did you?
Yes. So I initially was very enthusiastic to start on this homeschooling journey and so on, and I actually prefer it to call it home education, you know, and yes, but what I found was my son wasn't ready, I think, because just of how school was, and you know, kind of that frustration. He wasn't interested in to do anything, you know. So after a while I decided, okay, I wouldn't do anything.
Not anything reading and writing, that kind of stuff.
No, nothing
schoolish.
Yes, absolutely nothing. We'll just play.
Yeah.
You know, because also coming from South Africa, I mean, they, I'm not quite, I think Europe's similar. They would only go to school when they're 7.
Yeah, I think that's only in Sweden and Switzerland.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Well, yeah, in South Africa it's when they 7. So, you know, I was thinking, well, I mean, you know, he's still quite young, you know. I mean, if we were in South Africa, he wouldn't be in school. So he just played.
Yeah.
He did nothing school related whatsoever. He was just a child, you know.
Yeah.
And yes, so it was only, well, I don't know how long, you know, or months later, that I then, you know, slowly started with little things again, you know. Yeah. Yes.
And what did you do? Did you have a curriculum, or did you just make your material up yourself?
No. So, you know, we kind of a pretty relaxed family. So, I didn't want anything like, you know, really structured.
Yeah.
So, I mean, I never looked for a curriculum. So at a bookstore we've got here in town, they're little books which follow the national curriculum, and so I just bought some of those. And then there's a few books in the series, you know, and so gradually we worked our way up, and then you start the next series that follows on from that one. And that's kind of how we started, you know. And if I was in a bookstore or just wherever, and I saw, you know, a book that I thought, oh, you know, this looks nice or interesting, then I'd buy that, you know, and we'd do little bits from there, and yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And what about the social bit? How did you, because then you needed playmates?
Yes, so I had met another homeschooling lady who had 2 children at the time, also a son and a daughter, and she was living reasonably close to where we were. So I phoned her up. I can't remember where I found out about her, and so we would get together, and the children would play and we would chat, and we also went to church on a Sunday, and you know, there were children, and it was Sunday school for the children, and yes, so that was, initially the socialization. And as time went on, we heard about different groups that we had to go to, and you meet new people.
Me?
Yes. And I did also kind of run my own little group in the village hall.
Oh, I didn't know that.
Yes.
Oh.
No, not so far. Yeah, just up in the next village, and there was a few families that came to that for a few years, and then the nice thing about home education is you would, get to know the families very well.
Yeah.
So then you go visit them in their homes.
Yeah.
And the children play and do their thing. And as moms, we sit and chat, so you kind of become very good friends.
And often the fathers as well.
Yes, yes, that too. And yes, I never saw socialization as a, as an issue. I know many people, if they hear you home educate, that was one of the first questions they would ask you.
Yeah.
Is, now what about
Are
socialization?
they isolated?
Yes. But that was never an issue, And as the children get older and they, would say, oh, well, they want to play this sport or that sport, then you'd look for clubs or places, where they can go play that sport. Later on when my son was older, he did a lot of sailing, windsurfing.
Yeah, because he became the sailing instructor for my children.
Oh, really? I didn't know that.
He and Cormac. Because in the previous podcast we had Lynn, and so Lynn's son Cormac, because they were friends, Rowan and Cormac.
Yes.
So they became sailing instructors for Tualin and Ilene.
Oh, I didn't know that. And Ilene did ballet.
Yeah.
And horse riding.
I did horse riding lessons as well.
Yes.
Yeah.
So
and what made you decide to also homeschool Ilene? Was that just a natural flow, or?
Yes, I'd say pretty much. When Ilene came up, for school age, I never even considered putting Ilene in school, and and wherever I went with Rowan, Ilene came with, and would also make friends, and so I never even considered putting Ilene in school,
Did you ever want to go to school? Have you ever?
I think naturally you do think, you see other people in school, or and I think as humans we are curious. So even now sometimes I wonder what would it have been like if I went to school. I always say that if I went to school, I feel like I would be a very different person to who I am now. And I always wonder what I would have been like. But I don't regret being homeschooled. I wouldn't change it. I always say that I loved being homeschooled, and I think that it was probably one of the best things that my parents could have done.
And why exactly? Why? What did you like about it then?
I just think it made us closer as a family. I've got a very good relationship with my mum, and being able to just be allowed to be in a space and environment where I can learn, I can question things and learn through daily life. Just by doing life, you're learning. there's, loads of examples that, we can give, going to the shop and my dad explaining to me how to work out the change that the cashier is giving you. That's maths. And, rather than sitting in a classroom and just being told this is what you have to learn and just because it's part of the national curriculum, but actually applying things that you need to learn to a practical setting, Instead of going, oh, well, why do I need to know how to do this maths or read this or whatever? It's going, well, you need to be able to read because there's signs or you need to read a recipe. You need to be able to understand or, knowing maths because you need to go to the shop and you need to work out change. So I think, especially as a child, children always ask why. And I think being homeschooled, I never found that I would ask why and I would get an answer back that made sense.
Mm-hmm.
Why do I need to know this maths? Because you need to know the change so you're not getting ripped off or things like that, So it makes learning fun. And I think especially, now I'm 24, I'm nearly 25, I can look back, and I can actually see how beneficial that is to learn that way rather than just being told what to learn, when to learn it,
Yeah.
And again, it makes it fun as well.
Yeah, actually, Ilene just reminded me of something when Rowan was in school, that, yes, he would have to learn the alphabet. So, that's fair enough, But then he needed to learn it backwards as well. You just think, well, as such a small child, and then he had to count to 100. Okay, fair enough. But then the teacher would they also had to learn it backwards. And coming back to the alphabet, then the teacher would say the alphabet and leave a letter out, and then they must say now what letter was left out. I'm thinking, how? Well, I would have to think about that. We would go through the alphabet, and
they're 5 and 6 then.
Yes. And I remember the one day Rowan came home. And he said, oh, he doesn't understand why he needs to be able to count, And we said to him, well, if you've got 100 sheep, you're a farmer, you've got 100 sheep and they're out in the field. And in the evening, those sheep come home. You must be able to count them. And if there's one sheep missing, you get to 99 and, there's one sheep missing, then to go look for that sheep because there's one missing, And, then he was also like, oh, yes, So when Ilene was mentioning that, I thought about that. And, also, you think, well, obviously he was never told why in a practical setting.
You just
why you need to count, why and like with maths and things, and yes.
Yeah, what I find then, objectionable is that a 5 or 6 year old child goes to school the whole day and comes home and has homework.
Yes.
I mean, that's outrageous.
Yes.
At that age they should be able to play, and it's been a long day as it is. Anyway.
Yeah.
So were there any books that you yourself used as a reference? Because I do know that we shared some books, like John Holt and Gatto, this guy, this teacher from America, but some people read his books. Because he was a New York teacher, but he was really against school. He was voted the most effective teacher several times, but at the same time, he was very opposed to what was taught in school.
Yeah. I must say, no, I didn't. I suppose I would, look for ideas of, things to do. But so are you kind of saying for like myself to teach, have an
because I
idea,
remember being
or
insecure at times, like what are we doing, and is that the right thing to do, or because having been through the state system myself, I checked it with that system, which I would never do now anymore, but back then,
yes.
So then I bought books to sort of have a philosophy behind teaching, so to say.
All right. No, I didn't kind of go that way. No.
And no books that you saw, okay, according to the curriculum, you now have to be at that level with your children.
I think I might have done that once. But no, I never, followed any of that. I suppose because of what Rowan was like when I took him out of school, and I just kind of let him play for all those months before then starting slowly. I never followed the curriculum. I was kind of more child-led, and Rowan also, I would say, struggled a bit with reading, so he also only learned to read a lot later than, if he was in school.
Yeah.
Yes.
But he can read.
Yes, he can read,
Yeah, because it's interesting, because in the two previous interviews that I've done, and now you as well, and in my case, it is very child-led. It is the first child who actually that makes you think school won't fit for this child, it doesn't do. And that's what triggers then the homeschooling journey.
Yes.
Rather than, I didn't even know homeschooling existed when, before we started. And so that's interesting that it really is, you're looking at your child, you're observing, and you see that he's not doing too well in the system.
Yes. And also, as, Rowan grew and so on, and I'm sure with Ilene as well, he if he or Ilene said, they're interested in this, I know, Rowan said at some point, he wants to find out more about Vikings, and, I said, okay, well, let's go to the library.
Yeah.
Let's take out books, and, which we did,
Yeah.
And, so he kind of spent a long time, on that subject, just by looking at pictures and, reading books and storybooks on Vikings, and yes, so, it's child-led again, yes.
Yeah.
Wherever, they at, then you go according to that.
Yeah. And how often, because we met once a week at the Reading group, at the Berkshire group, but how often did you go to groups or homeschool related?
I think we kind of just went to the Reading group.
That was once a week on a Friday,
Yes,
I believe.
Yeah. So I don't think I went to any other groups as such. But then during the week, then I remember I would go and visit another homeschooling family, kind of quite regularly. So once a week I'd go to their house, and then the following week they'd come to our house. And yes.
Yeah.
So, and then, in between you'd go to visit other, like yourself or Lynn and them, and
And go on excursions. We had excursions
Yes,
as well.
yes.
And those
Yeah.
in themselves, the excursions were very educational.
Yeah.
I remember a lot of those actually, you know, going to London and going to the museum. And again, I think people take for granted that itself is a learning experience, going to London, you know, catching the train, it's busy, navigating, you know, figuring out on the map where to go, you know, even when you're in the museum. And I mean, some of these museums are massive and you can get lost in them, you know, like, you know, we'd have the map and you have to figure out where you're going, and, you know, you'd be with your friends like me and your daughter Nadani, you know, we would figure out, okay, right, we want to go here and see this one, but there's actually a talk on this topic at this time. And again, that is planning and communicating with, you know, another person to figure out, to come up with a plan. And those skills carry you through life. You know, you're going to have jobs, you're going to have to arrange things with other people. And I think even something as simple as that is a learning experience itself. And I think people take that for granted because they say it's not in a classroom, you're sat down, you have someone telling you what to do. It's almost then they feel like it's not a learning experience, when actually it is massively. And a lot of those tiny little examples of things like that have helped me so much, you know, in my life. You know, for example, going to the library and getting out books and reading and researching and finding out more and fact checking, you know, like via the internet or another book or talking to someone, you know, when I go on and did, you know, further education, you know, to get my qualification, those are things that I had to do, you know, and even though it's on a different subject and it might be a little bit harder, the principle is still the same, you know.
Yeah, and I think what you say is true, that you know, you learn to read the map and stuff, but in addition, you learn that you can do it, and you're sort of reinforced in confidence in yourself. I think.
Yeah.
I mean, I remember that, for example, from sailing. You know, I used to sail a lot, and then as a child, you were supposed to do these little tasks that were difficult. But then once you've done it, you felt really good about yourself because you've done it, and I think that's the. You're not told what to do, you're figuring it out yourself, and then you have this sort of encouragement internally to take on the next challenge.
And I think being in sort of the home educated environment, it was very much, you know, I think with, you know, sometimes health and safety can get a little bit out of hand, and being in school, you know, they often say like, oh no, you can't do that because it's dangerous, or you can't try this, or, you know, be careful when you're running, or, you know, as actually being in, you know, like I said, the home education environment, it's, okay, you want to try that? Okay, we can try that. We'll try it together, or I'll show you and then you can have a go. You know, because you've got the time and the space and the resources to be able to do that.
Yeah, and you've got parents who have a certain expertise, because did you go caving?
Yes, I went caving. And that in itself was, I mean, I look back at those times very fondly, you know, and I remember having responsibility, and sort of one of the last camps I went on, I actually became a cave second. So if something happened to our main leader while we were caving, it was my responsibility to make sure that everyone got out safely, you know.
Maybe you can explain quickly what caving is, because the term is not, I don't think, for Dutch people.
Yeah.
So what is caving?
Yeah, so I went caving with a group called EEK. Forgive me now, I can't actually quite remember what it stands for, but it was also another home education group, and we used to do a lot of sort of outdoor exploration caving type of trips, and there'd often be weekends.
Yeah, but you can actually go in a cave?
Yes, yeah.
And you find your way in.
Yeah, so we go in with our sort of like boiler suits, overalls, helmet, head torch, and we go in and we explore the cave, and we'll do a certain route, and then we'll come out again. And yes, some of the caves will be more challenging, some of them won't be. Some of them will have a sump where it's where you have to go underwater. So it's not like quite cave diving, but there is sort of water involved and you have to go underneath. So I know quite a few people that did that.
And sometimes you have to go through quite narrow entrances.
Yeah, no, definitely.
Yeah, because didn't you also say some caves, the entrance was just like a hole in the ground?
Yeah.
Where you...
Oh, really?
Yes, yeah.
Sometimes you're just walking up this hill, you know, and then they're like, oh, here's the entrance, and it's just this tiny little hole that you sort of go down, but then once you're down there, it's like, you know, you've got massive chambers, and then sometimes it's smaller, and you've got waterfalls that you need to climb up, you know. So people often ask, you know, about PE, you know, and I'm like, well, you know, you go caving, you go walking, you go cycling, you've got all these other activities that you can do as well. So.
Yeah. And then we had the groups, of course, where they ran and played sports
Yes, yeah.
And is there any particular thing, or maybe several things, that you would do differently now, looking back, than you have done then?
I don't actually think so.
Well, that's nice.
Looking back now, yeah, because I mean, I enjoyed the experience, you know, just as much, you know.
Yeah.
And to have those extra years of spending, you know, with your children.
Yeah.
And you know, also doing most of the activities as well,
Yeah,
also
exactly.
being involved, you know, and and doing it with the children, experiencing it with them, you know.
Yeah.
So no, I really enjoyed, you know, that time, and I mean, it wasn't, you know, always plain sailing, you know, having the children at home all the time. Yes, there are days where it's very challenging and, you know, you pulling your hair out. But, you know, I mean, I'm sure you'll have those even if your children were in school as well, you know.
Yeah.
But no, I really enjoyed it, and I don't think I'd do anything differently.
Now, because we discussed a bit earlier about the current situation in the world, and you and I are looking at the world as it is now the same way as well. And so then I asked you, would you, if you had known this was coming, this whole Corona, Great Reset, whatever period, would you have done things differently in the education to your children? And then we were sort of debating, well, yes and no, because you don't want to make them too suspicious or distrustful.
Yes. So, I mean, I think I was saying that, you know, I mean, you want to have confident children, you know, that aren't afraid, you know. Yeah. And, you know, because if you're confident and got a good self-esteem, and are responsible, then, you know, you will be able to think for yourself. You know, common sense is also a good thing to have. Yeah. And be able to see for yourself what is going on, you know, and to think for yourself whether, you know, you kind of trust what's going on or not, you know. Yeah.
And if you had focused more on bad governments or bad plans, then you would have put fear too much maybe into the children.
Yes.
That's what you're saying.
Yes. Yeah. Which, I mean, you know, one doesn't want to live in fear.
No.
You know, because it's not a good thing, you know.
No.
Sorry, I was just coming back to some earlier comments. I mean, you can also make a you know, education just about out of everything, you know, even, you know, when they were now much younger, you know, even making a cup of tea, you know, is a learning experience, you know. And so I mean, here in England, I would have to send in a report once a year to the education department, and you know, kind of put down everything we've done that year, and so I mean, I would put down even things like, you know, my children have learned to make tea, and you know, or, you know, make an egg or something, because that's all, it's life skills.
Yeah.
It's all learning, you know.
Yeah.
So, yes.
And while you're doing it, you talk about, I mean, I assume boiling water or, you know.
Yes, yeah.
And
Yeah.
even like you said about making the cup of tea, it was kind of only recently I was actually having a conversation with someone, and I was talking about, you know, home education and my experience, and it sort of clicked to me that I never actually got learnt how to cook, but I learnt how to cook just by watching you.
Yeah.
Every evening. I mean, you'd always cook fresh meals, home cooked from scratch, and I would be either like colouring in the kitchen or talking to you, or you know, reading or just doing
you would
some
help
mundane
me peeling vegetables, or, you know.
So
Yes.
just by watching, obviously there were certain things that you had to explain to me, but just generally by watching you, I just learnt how to cook fairly basic meals, and you know, and I think that made me, you know, I started to think more about my experience, and actually I think people underestimate how children sort of learn and pick things up, and you don't always necessarily have to explain everything to them, because they will watch you. I remember always watching you, like I always remember how listening to you talk on the phone, you know, and I know that can sound almost a bit silly, but a couple of years ago I got a part-time job, a temporary summer job as a receptionist, and I mean even that massively helped me. So it's these tiny little links that I think sometimes you think, oh well, you know, I don't know how that would be useful or whatever, but actually come a couple of years and then I go, oh well, actually I've got my phone skills from listening to my mum talk on the phone, and actually how important that is, you know. Yeah. So I think you then almost like you feel like your brain is a sponge and you just pick up everything, you know.
Well, it's this teaching by example or leading by example. You know,
Yes.
You're doing it, and
Yes.
children pick up.
Yeah, and I think children have got a natural curiosity to learn.
Yeah.
You know, they learn without you even doing anything.
Yeah.
I mean, I remember right in the beginning when I started, somebody said to me, well, you know, children learn all by themselves. And you're thinking, oh, how does that work? Because, you know, you've got the school mentality, you know, where they kind of taught everything, you know. But actually, you know, as you continue your journey and that your children get older, you realize, yes, that is very true.
Yeah.
You know, they will learn without any intervention. Yeah. You know?
And they lead themselves, because if they're suddenly very interested in tables, you know, then you will provide them with tables. But if they're interested in, I don't know, painting, then you will, because a lot of it is temporary, isn't it? They go through these phases that they're suddenly obsessed or taken by this, and then it sort of goes over and there's another phase.
Yes, yes. And I also say, well, when you've got a baby, I mean, you don't teach them how to crawl or how to walk. They do that themselves, you know. Yeah. And so you just go from there. Yeah. You know, you teach them, you know, with blocks, how to stack blocks. Oh, this is a red one, a blue one. You know, this is a square, this is a circle. So when you kind of start on your home education journey, you just progress from there, you know. You kind of don't need, you know, all sorts of amazing fancy things, you know.
No, because I found that with reading as well, because I used to read a lot of books to the children when they were very small. They would sit, you know, on either side, and I would, you know, it could be noddy or whatever.
Yes.
But it does make them learn to read, because they want to know. They want to know where you are, and they're beginning to know the book so well.
Yeah, they start following, you know, when, yes.
Yeah, it's very funny how that works.
Yeah.
And are there things that you regret having done in that you think, oh, that actually I shouldn't have done, or those were mistakes, or... I mean, I'm just saying that so other people can learn from it, you know.
Yeah. Yes. I actually can't think of anything offhand.
Do you have any criticism of the education you've received?
No, I don't think I do, and I say that with confidence. And actually, when I look at my friends, and you know, like Nadine, who I was home educated with, and you know, and how you did it, and how your experience, and how your family and my family and some of my other friends, families who are home educated, everyone experiences is the same but different in a way.
Everybody's taught differently.
Everyone is taught differently. Everyone has different parents. Everyone, you know, socialises in a slightly different way. So your experience of home education is so unique to you. And I think, you know, coming back actually earlier to your question where you said resources and materials used, I very distinctly remember, you know, even in the home education community itself, other parents and what they brought and how they helped educate, you know, the other children. They would do talks, you know, for example, one mum was really into painting, so at one of the home education groups, she said, okay, well, I'm going to hold an art class, you know, and I mean, I can give you loads of examples. There's another one, another friend, his dad worked at Beale Park, and he had lots of birds of prey, and I remember one day he brought them in, and it was in the summer, and we were outside, and he was showing us, and we got to try it with, you know, where the bird would come and land on our arm, and then he would, you know, teach us all about it. You go through, you know, like the anatomy, and this is this bird, and they have a wingspan of this, and you know, even though those might be deemed as useless facts, I remember those so fondly, and they were actually so interesting, you know. And now when I see a bird of prey, I always think, oh, I remember that, you know, and it's nice. And you know, later on in my education, when I had to do my GCSEs, there was another mum who was actually an ex-teacher, and she taught us biology, you know, because obviously you know, you guys are just, even though you're state educated, you know, you're not teachers, you're not, which I think a lot of people often think that you are. That's a question that I get asked a lot as a child who was home educated. Were your parents teachers? And I always say no.
Yeah, I would also get asked that, you know.
Yeah. But, I forgot what I was going to say now. You know, so that was
the
it.
biology.
So, yeah, so, you know, Karen was her name, so she had that knowledge and she could teach that to us. So she taught that, because that might be, you might have struggled to teach us that. But actually, even though you as my mother might not have been able to do that, within the community itself, there are other people that are able to do that.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah.
So, yeah, and I think I was very lucky with the family that I was brought up in as well, where we are a fairly DIY family. We like to make things and do things ourselves, and you know, even I think, you know, just being able to learn life skills, you know, skills that are going to carry you through life, learning to change a car tire, you know, especially with Rowan, my older brother. You know, my dad he built a shed in our back garden, and my brother would help him with that, you know, and even with that comes, you know, you can apply so much knowledge to that. That's measurements, that's maths, you know, using tools, you know, your health and safety, you know, using Pythagoras' theorem to work out things, you know, you can do it that way. So even though you're not learning in a classroom, you're learning in that environment, which makes it so much more applicable, and it makes sense to children. It makes sense, you know, because even when I went to college, I remember I said to my teacher, I said, okay, so why do we need to learn this, you know? And she said to me, oh, just because, you know. But growing up, having my childhood where I would say something and someone would say, oh, well, because you need to know it for this and this reason, I'd go, okay, well, that makes sense, you know. And I remember saying to her, I said, but how can we learn resilience in a classroom? I said, you learn that through life experience, and I still stand by that, you know. And I think, you know, you constantly learning and adapting throughout your whole life, you know, from a child into your adulthood. And people will say to me, oh, but you didn't learn everything the national curriculum did. No, I didn't. But I was allowed to be a child at the age when I was a child. I was allowed that. And you can, throughout your whole life, you can learn, you can read, you can go to university at 45. There's nothing stopping you. You don't have to go to university at 18. You can constantly learn and adapt. And sometimes, you know, like you were saying, children go through phases. I think in your life you also go through phases where, you know, you're interested in different things, and that's okay, you know. And I think the school system almost, it just teaches you need to learn this, you know, go to university, get a job, and then work, and then retire, you know. Whereas I think when you're home educated, you sort of you go through life with a slightly different mindset, you know, because you're constantly learning in life. You know, even now I'm constantly learning, like researching things online, going to the library, getting out books, you know. And that's just because of the way that I was brought up and with the mentality I had towards learning, is that you are always learning, even through life, you know?
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, I think, you know, many times the school system can stifle that curiosity that children have got, you know, and, you know, because they must fit into this box, you know. And which is terribly sad, you know.
No, and I think
because they all have to learn the same way in school.
Yeah.
Whereas, you know, we don't all learn the same way.
No.
You know.
And not at the same time.
Yes, yes. So, you know, through, you know, having the freedom of home education, you know, your children are able to learn different things at different times when they're ready, you know, and then it's just so much easier, and they pick it up so much easier.
Yeah.
And even as children, I remember we would learn off each other.
Yeah.
Because Nudanu and Tualin might be learning about something, and, you know, we'd be doing something different, and when we met up or, you know, visited each other's houses, we'd talk about that. You know, and then you learn off each other. You're like, oh, well, that's interesting. I didn't know that. Or maybe you went on an excursion on a day that we couldn't go, or maybe we went and did something different, you know, and you talk about that and you compare your experience and you learn off each other, you know. And actually that's really exciting, because in school you're all learning the same thing. So almost like that educational, you know, topic that you might talk about, it isn't there, you know. But actually being home educated, you really learn off each other, you know. And, you know, someone might be doing, you know, more advanced maths than me, you know, and I would look and I'd say, oh, well, you know, that's a bit complicated, or, you know, but I never felt like, oh, they were in, you know, they were better than me or I was worse, you know, like quite often in school where even now I hear people say, oh, well, I was in bottom set for that, or, you know, I was in top set for English or in bottom set for maths, you know. Because everyone is so different, everyone learns differently. You know, they didn't feel like that comparison. You know,
and especially you're not graded. I mean,
yes,
I never,
exactly.
You know, you do say to your children, this was right, or, you know, but you don't say this wasn't right. You say, are you sure? You know, did you calculate that? You know, but it's not like you now got an F or
yes.
Yes.
Yeah. And I think that the lack of, you know, the experience of not failing all the time is very important when you're so young, because it doesn't help. And they're not failing; they just haven't grasped a concept yet.
Yes. That's actually a good point.
Yeah.
Yes.
And I just realized when you were talking, I thought actually that is what is lacking. That's significant that it's lacking in homeschooling, because you're progressing, but you're never really failing.
Yes.
Yes.
Yeah.
It's so
so this
true.
pressure of these SATs and all these tests is not really there, because you just develop at your own pace.
And I think that also helps you in adulthood as well, is if, you know, you have to, you know, later on in my GCSEs, some of my exams I had to write twice. And I never thought, oh man, I failed. You know, I've not learned the information. I've not done it. I just thought, okay, well, I just didn't get it that time, but I can try again.
Yeah.
You know, it was, you can always rewrite an exam. You know, just because you didn't pass that time doesn't mean you failed. It just means, okay, well, I almost view it as that was a trial. Okay, now I know what the exam, I know what it feels like. So when I go in again, it'll be more familiar, you know, so I can do it again. Yeah. You know, as I think, you know, like you said, school puts that pressure on it. So, oh, you've failed or you've passed, you know, and that can be really damaging to children.
Yeah. Yeah, I think that lack of pressure is a good one. Yeah.
Yes, yeah. Yeah, always having to like meet targets, you know.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, and otherwise you're not going to make this school or that school. And of course, they get it, especially my children, because they did go to secondary school, so they did get it. But it's nice when they're young to not, you know,
to just not have that.
Not have it.
Yes.
And even, you know, I remember my son, for example, doing maths, which he loved. But even that was enough from time to time for him. And then he would run out to the garden and jump on the trampoline and then he would run back in again.
Yes.
And you couldn't do that in school. Are there any subjects, questions we should have been talking about? Because we did sports a little bit, you know, your children, you just joined sports clubs, right?
Yes, yeah. Or like, you know, Ilene also did horse riding. You know, there was a farm down the road who offered that, and so you kind of, you know, if this is what they're interested in, then you'd look for something, you know, relatively close by to where you live.
Because Rowan did the cadets.
Join that. Yeah. Yes, he did do cadets.
So he learned to fly.
For many years. Yeah. He did, yes. Yeah. I think he started off with Scouts and then did that for a few years and then went on to cadets and worked his way up. What did Rowan become in
Flight sergeant?
Flight sergeant. Okay, so yes. Yeah, he became flight sergeant through cadets. Also did shooting through them, flying.
Did he join that fencing club as well? The Cormac and...
No. But yes, speaking on the subjects, I've just thought of through I don't know if it was the Reading group or through one of the groups, you did plays as well.
Yes,
put
did
on
a bit
some
of
plays.
I forgot about that.
Yes.
Yeah.
So did a bit of acting and
I did Alice in Wonderland. I remember that.
But actually, nobody really taught that. It was just you children who got together and started putting things on, right?
Yeah. And I think also because going off topic a little bit, but being in a space where we are educated, but also we're allowed to get bored. And I think people are so scared of that now. And I think when, you know, you look at the school system now, the children are constantly so overstimulated all the time. It's, you know, going to school, coming back, doing homework, you know, having dinner, getting ready for bed, and then doing it all again. You know, I remember days where I was bored in the afternoon, and then you start thinking, now what can I do? You know, you start walking around the house and you use your imagination and you start thinking about things. And then I would, you know, come to my mum or my dad or, you know, my friends, and I'd say, hey, look, we should do a play, you know, or maybe I got inspired even through my dance and ballet. I did shows. So maybe that's what inspired me to go to my home education group and say, hey, we should do a show. We should maybe do something. Or maybe I read Alice in Wonderland and I thought we could act this out, you know. And I think getting bored is a good thing. And I think people paint it as a really bad thing, where actually I think especially in children, it allows for that creativity to start thinking for yourself and you know, and I just hate it when people you know, you can't be bored, it's a bad thing. I think it's a good thing in children, you know. Yeah, it
gives you space.
Yes,
for your imagination to, you know, yes.
Yeah, and initiatives come out of it usually.
Yeah, but coming back to the exercise side of things, it was also, like you said, Tualan would run out and jump on the trampoline during the day. He wouldn't just do that once, maybe 3 or 4 times. We, as a family, we've always had dogs, and because we had time during the day, we would take the dog, out to the forest and we'd walk with the dog, we would go cycling, and I remember we'd go on many walks where, we would go through numbers or colours, or we would talk about things that we've learnt. And because you're sort of walking and you're doing something else rather than just being sat there, it doesn't feel like, okay, now we're going through numbers and colours or whatever. We're just having a conversation. We're just talking and we're learning, or we'd go through trees or leaves, or I remember Rowan went through a phase where he did a lot of outdoor sort of like forest school. Yeah. So then we'd walk.
You also took part in those as well.
And then, and even like, I remember, and even now sometimes I'll say things and you'll go, oh, I didn't know that. And it's actually nice when you sort of form a relationship where you can educate each other and you constantly learn. And I think me and my mum were having a conversation about it the other day, and you said that you actually learned so much. Through your experience, and actually that was really nice, because for me I was like, oh well, it didn't feel like a chore to educate me. It was, we're in this together, I'm learning and you're learning, and that's nice, but you're always active, like you said, at the education groups, you're always running outside playing, even in winter, you wrap up warm and you get out in the fresh air, I remember always going to Lynn's house and Lynn was always like, nope, you're outside playing, and we'd, be outside and, we'd play hide and seek, or, even we'd make, sort of like pretend, weapons out of wood. And I remember my dad was always is good with things like that. So, he would take the boys and he would help them and show them, and right, we're going to cut it and we're going to sand it down and varnish it, and then, we might help paint, or they would paint it, and then we'd use those. And I remember, the very almost like typical you would almost see in like old movies, in the dirt with a stick, we all gather round and we'd, draw maps in the dirt, and right, you've got this one and you've got that one, and this is your responsibility, and you wait here until the next one gets here, That is all major planning, and actually if you
make your games up, your own little games, and and
we'd have names, and so you're just constantly being active. And I think because we weren't, confined to a classroom where we had to sit down for so long, we could, walk and run and jump, and we could say, okay, well, I've had enough of doing this today, I'm going to go for a walk. We were able to do that. And even when I went to college, I remember some of my lessons were 3 hours long, and I remember being sat there and I was like, man, I'm struggling. I was like, I just want to go for a walk. I just want to get outside, because it helps you think and clear and process things, and, you can't concentrate for that long, I'd really
get
struggle.
The oxygen kind of flowing,
Exactly,
coming back to what Ilene said with movement and learning, I think that's, obviously for girls that's also important, but I think, maybe more so for boys, because I remember Rowan, when he was much younger, he would never sit on the chair at the table when we were doing things. He would always be moving, walking, around, or when he got older, I'd hear him in his room, then he's tapping with his pencil on the desk, and I remember another home education mother saying to me, yeah, but boys, have to move to learn, and yes, so that I did find is true,
Yeah, and
Yeah,
those
that-
are the things you learn as a parent because, you know, being used to school yourself, to state school, you've learned to sit.
Yes.
And especially being, you know, a good girl, you sat. But
Yes.
then you get a boy, like your boy and all the other boys, in our group at least, that, you know, within no time you discover, well, this doesn't work. You know,
Yes.
telling your son to sit, that has absolutely no
Yes.
effect.
Yeah.
Not in terms of obedience, but in terms of learning. He then doesn't take it in.
Yes. Yes.
And I also remember that you would say about Rowan sort of daydreaming, and then you'd say to you, no, I'm thinking.
Yes.
You know.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, that kind of came when Rowan was at school. The teacher, you know, before I took him out, the teacher was saying things to me like, you know, Rowan daydreams. You know, he's looking out the window. You know, and there's no time to be doing that. You know, he must be doing his work. You know, and it was only when, you know, he was at home and we started, you know, doing things at home, that I also found him kind of just sitting, you know. And then I'd also say to him, oh, you know, Rowan, you know, come, you know, let's do this or whatever. And then he'd say, oh, you know, he was thinking about, you know, the sums or whatever. Now he must start all from the beginning again, you know. and then I realised, oh, he isn't actually just sitting daydreaming, you know, that he is actually, I mean, he's thinking about...
He's busy.
Yes, you know, what he needs to do, you know.
Great important work is being done.
You know, so, you know, it's,
Yeah. No, it's true. Right. Well, I thank you very much for this nice interview and informative. Thank you too, Eileen, for all your input. No, it's really nice because you're the first daughter or child that we have, so it's nice to hear from that.
No, I like sharing my experience and almost proving people wrong in a way, you know, to say that actually, you know, whether you're homeschooled, we all come out fine in the end, you know. We're not weird and wacky, and actually you know, you come out as a well-rounded individual, you know, and you
because
know,
it doesn't have that stigma a lot.
It does.
You always looked at that it's a bit weird, it's a bit funny, but you know, in this Corona time we're now used to being weird.
And you know, also, you know, if at one stage, you know, they did start late or they only learned something much later than, you know, what the people tell you that they should have, at the end of the day they all reach the end point. You know, and yes, so
And I always found it a very interesting research where they followed the Swedish and the Swiss children, or I think it was especially the Swedish children, when they went to school at 7 only, and the French and English went much earlier. And then they found that by the time the Swedish children were 9, they had already overtaken the ones who had been going to school since 3. So it's such a waste of time, really. All that playing time is wasted.
And I think I mean, playing is important for children because that's also learning.
It is work.
That's coordination and, you know, eye hand, you know, coordination, all of that, you know.
Imagination as well, building things, and being creative, which is important, you know. And even in school, it's almost like, you know, you're either academic or you're, you know, arts and crafts. But why can't you be both? Why can't you be a little bit of everything, you know, and you know, be interested in everything? And, you know, we spoke about, you know, going through phases, and I think that's fine. Even in my adulthood, I'm finding I'm still going through these phases, you know, of being interested in different things, and I think that's okay, you know. And you know, even now, I might not know everything academically. I might not know everything that a child that went to school know, but I've got my whole life to learn that. You know, like I said, I can, like I wasn't really too interested in physics when I was younger, but who knows, maybe in my 30s I'll decide I want to do a qualification in physics. I want to learn more about physics because I don't know where life's going to take me, and I think that's really exciting. But in my childhood, I was allowed to be a child, and I had a good childhood, and I think that's important. And I think sometimes that gets lost, where it's almost like, well, you need to find a job, and it's either like you work or you go into education. Well, why can't it be both? Why can't you? You're constantly developing and learning, but actually you've only got, one childhood, and you're only 1 to 5 once, and actually being able just to play and be a child and not have this pressure of, come, you need to do the work, you're daydreaming, Again, like I said about being bored. Well, what's wrong with daydreaming? Why have we made it a bad thing? Because that's your imagination, and even now I feel like compared to some children that went to school, I have a wild imagination. I feel like my imagination is still very much there at the age of 24. I'm constantly thinking about things and different ideas, and even sometimes they'd be quite childlike. You're in the forest, and I'll always remember, when I was a child, you think about all the little fairies, around the trees, or things like that, all this sort of, all these sorts of things. So yeah, which I think is important, because especially in today's society, we're just taught to think one way and sort of, follow the order in which society wants us to, that actually you feel like, when you sort of have your imagination and you have a sort of a different outlook on life, you feel like, well, you don't fit the standard, but actually you become so confident and self-assured. It's like, I don't fit the standard, rather than being like, well, maybe I should be more like them, because you feel confident in being individual and unique, because when you're home educated, no one tells you, you're weird, or you're not very good at this, or there's no pressure, or you're failed, or you're not very good at school, or or you're really good and you're academically gifted, or things like this. So you get into adulthood and you feel just so much more confident in yourself, because of all these things and how you were brought up in your childhood. And I think that is something that is really special.
Well, on that wonderful note, we're going to round off. And I just want to say to the audience, we do these series just to offer anybody who wants to maybe take their children out of school or start a school with a little community. It's not to say that any of our ways are the right way. It's just to generate ideas and possibilities, and most of all to give courage or faith that whatever you do, if you do it, in the interest of your child and with the love of your child, it'll be fine. And we can all testify to that.
Definitely.
Right, thank you very much for watching. Bye-bye.
Het gaat hier vandaag over saamhorigheid.
Dagje zonder hemel.
Eerste liegt niet. Normaal maken is wat niet normaal.
Every nation
in
every
region
now has a decision to make. En dan ook geen hel meer.
You think I'm joking? Predator
Dat
drones.
is best makkelijk.
You will never see it coming.
Wat dacht je, alle mensen?
Laat staan dat ik kan ingaan over vuur.
Bezig met vandaag.